Why does Windows only show about 3.5 GB of my 4 GB of RAM? I recently upgraded my computer's RAM to 4 and NBSP GB. My 32-bit Windows installation shows only 3,574 and NBSP MB of the memory. How can I make Windows use the full amount of RAM?
You can't. See dude, where's my 4 GB of RAM? If you want to fit memory and devices into a 32-bit address range, not all of the available 4 GB of address space can be given over to memory. So what actually happens if you go out and buy 4 GB of memory for your PC? There's a hole in your memory map for the I/O. Now it's only 25% of the total address space, but it's still a big hole, so the bottom 3 GB of your memory will be available, but there's an issue with that last 1 GB. The only practical solution is to install a 64-bit operating system. In Windows Vista and later, 32-bit and 64-bit license keys are interchangeable. If you can get Windows installation media for the 64-bit version of your operating system, you can reinstall using your original license key.
First, Windows XP, 32-bit, only supports 4 GBs. That doesn't just apply to Windows XP. Instead, it applies to 32-bit desktop Windows, 32-bit Linux systems with Pi, and many 32-bit Windows Server editions support more than 4 GB per the linked article. You will never see over 4 GBs if you are using a 32-bit Windows XP. However, I did find a more detailed reason why your system shows less available RAM than what is actually installed. From the 3 GB not 4 GB RAM problem, Microsoft MSDN blog. Due to an architectural decision made long ago, if you have 4 GB of physical RAM installed, Windows is only able to report a portion of the physical 4 GB of RAM, ranges from 2.75 GB to 3.5 GB depending on the devices installed, motherboard's chipset and AMP, BIOS. This behavior is due to memory map I/O reservations. Those reservations overlay the physical address space and mask out those physical addresses so that they cannot be used for working memory. This is independent of the OS running on the machine. Significant chunks of address space below 4 GB, the highest address accessible via 32-bit, get reserved for use by system hardware. BIOS, including ACPI and legacy video support. CBus including bridges etc. C-Express support will reserve at least 256 MB, up to 768 MB depending on graphics card installed memory. What this means is a typical system may see between 256 MB and 1 GB of address space below 4 GB reserved for hardware use that the OS cannot access. Intel chipset specs are pretty good at explaining what address ranges gets reserved by default, and in some cases call out that 1.5 GB is always reserved and thus inaccessible to Windows. There is more information if you check out the source. However, you may be able to take advantage of the full 8 GBs installed if you follow these instructions. Speaking from personal experience, this is no new problem. I ran into the same problem a few years ago when I built a 4 GBs 32-bit Windows Vista system when Vista was first released. There were countless forum posts online related to this same topic. Read also Microsoft KB 929605. The system memory that is reported in the System Information dialog box in Windows Vista is less than you expect if 4 GB of RAM is installed.
Old motherboard only supported 4 GB of physical RAM, modern ones support a lot more. The Intel P4 CPU could always address more than 4 GB, by using something called Physical Address Extension, or PAY. Microsoft made a marketing decision not to support more than 4 GB physical address space in the client versions of all the 32-bit versions of its operating systems. That includes all of them from W2K to 32-bit Windows 8. If you visit the MSKB pages, you will note that the 32-bit server versions can support a lot more, up to 128 GB I believe with the 32-bit Enterprise Edition, which is why proper 32-bit OSes, Linux etc., on exactly the same hardware could always access all the physical RAM. Side note, 32-bit Win 7 users got so fed up with this stupid limit that they hacked the kernel to allow access to the full physical RAM. Needless to say, this breaks your license and is actually illegal in US. Windows XP 32-bit reserves part of the low 4 GB address space for driver use. There is no reason why you can't address physical RAM beyond 4 GB, using PAY. However, many older drivers around at the time of Windows XP Pro failed to do so and you would get a BSOD error. Modern drivers use PAY correctly and in theory there is no reason why they need more than about 32 MB of low space pages as a window, in total even to support a 2 GB graphics card. The 2 GB will be in high space, i.e. above 4 GB mark. In XP SP2, MS almost tripled the amount of address space reserved for drivers in an effort to eliminate the BSODs, and it's been that ever since. MS don't want to debug drivers ==, they want to sell you the 64-bit OS instead. The actual hardware has almost zero effect on this reserved space. So, if you have 4 GB or more of physical RAM, the most XP Pro SP2 Plus will see is about 3.25 GB. The rest can be accessed using various different RAM disk drivers, not the MS one of course. Go look for something that uses the invisible address space or high 4 GB space on XP Pro, using the missing 75 GB as part of your virtual memory can speed up your system. Note that the /3 gram switch can allow 32-bit applications to access up to 3 GB on a 32-bit OS, if they have the large address-aware flag set in there. X-header, in which case they can access up to 4 GB on a 64-bit OS, but on XP you need to specify /uservar as well to stop the OS being squeezed out of RAM smile.
As the others have said, it's not possible. Explanation. Each piece of memory has an address. The operating system specifies the length of the address. For older operating systems, the address length is 32 bits, which only allows 232, 294, 967, 296 addresses. Now, looking at that number, it might seem like your operating system should support 4 GB, but all other hardware, most significantly, the video RAM in your video card, that has internal memory also gets mapped into that address space. It's like you're trying to distribute 1,200,000 6-digit telephone numbers.
If you want to support the channel, please consider subscribing.